Welcome to Compose Yourself, the podcast where academic writing meets self-discovery for the students at the Chicago School.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Cindy.
Whether you're crafting your first essay or refining your voice as a writer, we're here to guide you through the art of composition.
From brainstorming to final drafts, we'll break down the tools and techniques to help you think critically, write effectively, and express yourself with confidence.
So, grab a pen, open your mind, and
compose yourself. Welcome to the Module 5 podcast. Today we're going to be talking about rough drafts and analysis in the context of this paper for our English 200 class. So, Jason, up to this point, our students have been doing a lot of pieces of writing for this big paper that they're going to be doing at the end, the research paper. They've done research proposals. They've talked about research questions. They've done annotated bibliographies. We've done a lot of pieces that come together to make a whole. So the good news is they're not starting off from from scratch, from not having anything to work with. They have so much to work with by the time they're at this rough draft stage. So what we're trying to get them to do now is sort of connect all of these pieces and see how they fit together to make the whole puzzle. So, Jason, when you think about trying to do that, like connecting, writing, and getting everything to flow together as one cohesive piece in this rough draft stage, what are some things that you think about when you're trying to do something like that so that, like, what would you tell our students about how you approach a project like that?
oh goodness. I mean, ideally, I would say take a step back and just give yourself some time to not even think about the project. Because sometimes if I am too much in the weeds and it's all up in my brain, if I go to keep working on it, it doesn't click. It's almost like a fatigue sets in. So I like to give myself a day or two. I know this is an accelerated course, so it may be just a day, but to give yourself that time to clear your mind. And then because I like reapproaching it with a fresh perspective. And then when I reapproach it, it's almost like Legos, and you see all the million pieces on the floor, and I'm like, what am I even building? I would go to the assignment sheet, pick it up, look at it, and I say, oh, okay, this is what I'm building. And that lets me understand how all of these different parts are going to contribute to that whole. So I would say those are my two biggest pieces of advice. What about you?
My biggest pieces of advice in the way that I work is I need two things in front of me the whole time. And that is my thesis statement, my working thesis, and my outline. So as a younger writer, or should I say a less experienced writer, I did not like outlines at all. I really did not like doing them. I found them like, oh, they're too restrictive and, whatever. But now I see the utility in it as I've had to write longer and longer papers because it's
Right.
almost impossible to keep on the road, of where you want to end up if you don't have a map. You need a map. So I
Okay.
feel like when I start to try to bring all the pieces together, the way I orient my brain is every time I sit down to write, I read my thesis statement every time. So I sit down,
Right.
I have to work on this project. Like I have to move the ball, you know? So the first thing I'll do is read my thesis statement to sort of reorient my mind in what I'm aiming at. And then I'll review where I'm at in the outline, like what pieces needed to go in next. And that seems to help me just sort of rebuild the map in my mind and sort of get things going again. But I think this sort of links to this idea that students find very difficult, which is they want to get it right the first time. So when they're writing a rough draft, they're like, okay, this is the big thing. I've got to do it right. I've got to bring it all together and it's got to be perfect. And like the idea of having to move whole paragraphs around is like just very overwhelming sometimes. So I feel like what students try to do is get it right the first time. They want their rough draft to be their final draft. Like, and this feeling of really a great deal of performance anxiety starts to set in. I feel like it's got to be right. What are your thoughts about drafting and how we can get to a place of acceptance that a rough draft is never a final draft?
I'm going to begin with a story time. I'm old enough that back in high school, we still wrote essays in pencil. And I remember a time that I was writing the draft of an essay, because then we would go to a computer lab and type it up.
Right.
And I got a 0 with "see me after class." Oh my goodness, what happened? My teacher couldn't read it. I had written so much with pencil and then erased and then written and then erased that the entire thing was just, this jumbled mess and you couldn't read it. And I bring that up because then even as I started going to college, computers were everywhere. Everything you do is now digital. I still would write a sentence, pause, look at the sentence, go back, edit it and tweak it. So it's kind of that same behavior of, that internal censor inside of me was pausing myself at every word, every sentence, every paragraph.
Hmm.
And a few hours later, it's still a pretty terrible draft, but it just took me a few hours to even write a page. And it took a long time to break that habit from myself, to let it all out, to know I will go back and edit it. Yes, I misspelled that word. That's okay. That's easy to fix. But I didn't find that it came naturally to do that. I always wanted to go back and edit, edit, edit as I was writing my initial draft. So I think breaking free from that control, kind of silencing that inner critic or censor, is absolutely essential in the drafting phase.
I completely agree. And I think it's important now. I mean, think about it now. You don't just have your internal critic saying, that sounds stupid. That's not going to be right. You also, a lot of students are simultaneously using an editing tool like Grammarly while they're drafting, and it's popping up squiggle lines and red things. And so I think this is a really good point and also really important to say, turn off the editing tools while you're drafting. Do
Yes.
not use Grammarly while you're drafting. Do not use the editor functionality in Microsoft Word. You have to get your thoughts out so that you have the raw material to work with. So, this is something that comes up a lot when I'm meeting with students in the Office of Student Writing and Learning. So, if we're having an appointment to look at their paper, um, so many students get very locked up about drafting and they don't get enough on the page to work with. You have to put some stuff on the page that isn't great to get great stuff on the page. So especially if you're going to work with a writing specialist, so say maybe our students are going to start their drafts and then they're going to meet with somebody in the Office of Student Writing and Learning to help them work, or they want to come and talk to us. If you bring me 5 pages of what you think is trash, we've got something we can work with. We've got raw material. We've got something we can shape. But I can't do anything with nothing, right? Like you
Right.
can't do anything with nothing. So I think it's important to just start. It's okay if it's kind of bad. You can work with kind of bad. What you can't work with is kind of nothing. So, what do you think about that,
Right.
Jason?
I think that, so many people see that as, almost like a moral judgment against
Oh, yeah,
themselves.
I agree.
Like I'm just a terrible writer. Look at what I produced. And, you know, we, I'm sure we both had to read all kinds of different writing manuals for people like Stephen King or John Green or, Anne Lamott or whoever it is. And every single one of them, the greatest writers in the world, they all talk about my first draft was terrible. My second draft, I wanted to throw it out the window. And then my third, fourth draft, so on and so forth. It was through that revision process that the magic came out.
Hmm.
So that kind of helped me in that if I know that the world's greatest writers are producing terrible work, then it's not a moral judgment on me. It's just normal, right? It's life. It's how
Yes.
writing and life are.
Yes. And trivia, was it Walt Whitman that spent his entire life revising his
Leaves the
public
grass.
Leaves of Grass? I
Oh
mean, like
yes.
you have incredibly talented people who are thinking, this thing was good enough to get published, but I'm not happy with it yet. I think it could be even better. you know?
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's the creative process. And as scholars and academics, our students are in the creative process, whether they want to be or not sometimes. And that's what the process looks like. It's like writing, writing when it feels like it's not coming through, writing when you read it and you're like,
Right.
why did I do that? It's
Right.
getting some material on the page so that you have something to work with. So,
Well,
as
actually, and I
we're,
have one more
oh,
on
yes,
that is
please.
that sometimes when I get writer's block, I will sit there and I will literally just type out, I have writer's block. I don't know what I'm saying. I have no idea what's going to come next. This sentence is terrible. But I just keep going. And then, of course, before I submit that assignment, I delete that section. But I've found that there's something about the physical activity of the writing as well, that recognizing, yeah, my brain's it's going haywire. It can't figure this out, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. Something will emerge. Um,
I love
so
that.
I always recommend to people like, yeah, say what you think. Like say it out there. The last sentence I typed was awful. It's on the page.
I
You can
know I
type it
need to
later.
add something here, but I don't know what
Uh-huh.
it is.
I need more sources.
Right. I
Yeah,
see students
just
do that a lot in drafting, and they'll write that sentence out and they highlight it and they move on, And then when they come talk to me in the writing center, we can deal with that highlighted section. Let's go look at that. Let's see what we need to do there. But they just make the note and move on so that they don't get stuck there. And I think that's so smart. I love it when students do that.
I do too.
So as we're having them like start with this drafting process, they're also going to be working through which of the three tracks of analysis they're going to be doing. And I think this is a good conversation for you and I to have, especially like since we are giving them these options. So I think what we were really after when we did that was to give our students even more autonomy over their research project. Like from the beginning of this class, we've wanted this to be a meaningful project for the students. So they need to choose a topic that's of interest to them, that's going to help them learn something that serves their discipline, that's going to help them, understand the discourse and their discipline about a certain topic. And so when we get to this drafting stage, we really want them to start choosing a direction that their analysis is going to go. So it felt more authentic to us to have them have options of which direction their specific topic and project seems to need to go. What are your thoughts about these three tracks, and what is your advice that you would give to students about that, about choosing a track?
That's a hard one. And I think mostly it's kind of like because of what you said, that it really depends upon what the topic is. It depends upon the direction the research is headed in. So honestly, if anything, I'm just a little jealous of our students because I didn't have teachers that really did this. Like I would have to commit to a certain choice from the very beginning. I couldn't deviate, I couldn't change. So I am kind of jealous that, as our students have gone through the literature review and the annotated bibliography, they've started reading what all is out there. I mean, I know that my mind often changed after I would read scholarly research. I might even completely rewrite my thesis.
Hmm.
So I guess my biggest advice is to listen to yourself and to review and really think about like, what direction do I want to head in? What does the research say? What can I kind of like beg out from my thesis?
Where does this topic want to go?
Right.
I feel like you have to get in the stream of your topic, this stream of your thinking about this, and then which direction you want to go becomes clear. But if you step out of that and start thinking, what's the right answer? What do they want me to say here? Then that's when it gets a lot trickier, I feel, to really
Right.
develop an analysis. Because I mean, analysis really, I mean, guess we should talk a little bit about what that means, right? So we're asking them to choose an analysis track. And so what's analysis? So why don't you tell me, Jason, what when you hear you need to do more analysis, what you think that means?
I think there is a similarity between analysis and synthesis in the sense of being a meaning maker. And if synthesis, though, is finding meaning in the conversation other people are having, I feel like analysis is telling your reader, I'm saying, here's the meaning I found. Here's the meaning that I am making out of the evidence, out of the topic, out of my thesis, out of everything together. I'm giving you my unique perspective. And that's why analysis can be difficult, but is also so much fun, at least to me, is that no two analyses will look the same. Um, again, just like synthesis. What do you think?
That is maybe the best description I've ever heard
I'm done.
of
Bye.
that's it, mic drop. That's probably the best description I've ever heard of the link between synthesis and analysis. Really, truly, it was. Because I think that is the missing piece. It's like, yes, we want you to bring together what these people said, but then you need to explain to your reader why that has meaning to your topic. So what I'll see students do often is they'll have a topic sentence for a paragraph and they'll bring in um, you know, sources that help them talk about that topic. And then they, paraphrase something from a source, cite it at the end, next paragraph. And usually when I see a citation at the end of a paragraph, to me that indicates a lack of analysis almost all the time because what I need from my writer, like so if I'm your reader, that means I'm not the source's reader. You were. The
Right.
writer was. So I want to know what the writer saw, what were the links in their minds? Like, don't make me, the reader, do the lifting. Like, I'm supposed to
Mhm.
surmise somehow why this point links to your topic. Analysis is, in my opinion, the writer showing their reader why these things connect. Why does this source connect to what's important to you? How does it support the point that you're trying to make? So, to me, a good indication of more analysis needed would be ending on a citation. What do you think about that as an indication?
I always tell students never, ever, ever end a paragraph with a quote or a paraphrase. Um, and of course, there are times where you can break that rule. But I would rather I just don't. I would rather just get that out of your mind. Don't do it because you're right. Like I used to write back in the day. I would write in the margins. So what?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what? You've said this, but so
Okay.
what? And
You
going
walked
back
away
to
from me and left
right.
me trying to figure it out.
I'm just kind of sitting here staring like I don't get what's going on. And going back to our Comp One terms, when we think about appealing to ethos or building your credibility to your reader, I think that that is a poor appeal to ethos, because I don't view this author as credible. If they're making me do that heavy lifting, like why am I even reading this writer?
Right,
Um,
you could go read the article, right, that they're ending on. Like,
right.
okay, if all I needed to do was go read that article to understand your paper, then there's analysis missing.
Mhm. And then it's not, if you are not appealing to ethos, and really in a way, if you're not appealing to logos, your paper is less persuasive. And I
Hmm.
think that I really would love to get it into our students' head that most academic writing is persuasive. When you have this thesis, you're developing this argument, you're trying to persuade your audience. And I will not be persuaded by by just random quotes that are thrown out, by incomplete thoughts, I want to see the analysis. Convince me.
Right. Convince me that you understand this topic and you have something to say about it. I
Mhm,
think that's
mhm.
really, really important. I think these are great tips as they start to work on their rough drafts. Do you have any final kind of thoughts about drafting, sticking in with that analysis even when it starts to get difficult? Final thoughts for this week's work in English 200.
I wanted to say just do it, but I don't want to be sued by Nike. But just do it. Like just get your thoughts out. That is the number one thing that has helped me throughout all of college is turn off that inner critic, silence that inner censor. Don't go back and edit that previous line or sentence or word. Just write.
That's excellent advice because on next week's podcast, we're going to talk about approaches to editing and revision. So, next week, we want them to focus on editing and revision. This week, we don't. Get your thoughts
Just
out,
write.
get a terrible draft ready, because next week we'll do that editing and revision work. We're also going to talk about applying APA style to and some general visual rhetoric approaches to designing a PowerPoint slide deck. So we're going to give a little bit of advice about that in a sort of fun way by looking at what you don't want to do. So I hope that'll be helpful when we talk about that next week.
I'm excited.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Compose Yourself.
Remember, writing is a process, and every word you write brings you closer to becoming the writer you want to be.
We hope you enjoyed today's discussion and that it makes clearer the topics you're exploring in this course. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to your instructor.
Until next time, keep thinking critically
And always compose yourself.